Hey folks, Jonathan Phoenix here. Before you guys get into the episode, I want to tell you about an upcoming event at which I am going to be a guest. Atomicon, May 4th and 5th, 2024 at the North Charleston Candlewood Suites, 2177 North Woods Boulevard. Atomicon is celebrating its 10th year as the All Types of Media and Arts convention here in Charleston. There will be sci-fi, fantasy, and paranormal guests, along with a film festival and a cosplay contest. So, I'll see you there. Go to atomicon.org and get your passes now. Let Me Tell You a Story is a product of Carolina Storyteller, starring Jonathan Phoenix, written, produced, and directed by Jonathan Phoenix, edited and recorded by Jonathan Phoenix, and horribly marketed by Jonathan Phoenix. Man, I gotta hire a staff. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/Carolina Storyteller and subscribe to get exclusive content and all kinds of other neat stuff. We even have merchandise coming. Anyway, sit back and enjoy the show. Welcome back to the show, folks. Thank you for joining me. I hope you had an amazing week. This week's story is the tale of two families and something truly evil. Now, I've touched on some pretty dark stories in this, and the fact is that this one has the ring of truth to it. And I'm going to try and give you the story with as many of the facts as you can get from those who experienced it. But you have to understand is that there are so many competing views of this story, not to mention the fact that it was fantasized by Hollywood and made into this great, huge movie production. I'm talking, of course, about Amityville. And if you're aware of the movie and the book, then you know a little bit about the story. But you probably don't know the whole story. Because this story didn't start with the family moving in. No. This story started a year before. Like I said, it's the tale of two families. It's a tale of tragedy. And it's a tale of something truly evil. So let me tell you the story. Our story begins with the Defoe family, Ronald, Louise, and their children, Ronald Jr., Don, Allison, Mark, and John. Ronald Jr. was 23 years old, and in November of 1974, in the middle of the night, Ronald Jr. brutally murdered both of his parents and all four of his younger siblings. The next day, he reported it to the police, claiming that he found them dead, stumbled upon them all, shot to death. Later, he confessed, stating that it was voices that had driven him to murder his family, evil voices from the house. Even later still, he claimed that other family members had helped him commit the murders. And then still, the devil made him do it. Ronald Jr. changed his story many times over the years. He was convicted of the murders and sentenced to 25 years to life in a New York State penitentiary, where he stayed until he died in 2021. He never did give a straight answer as to why he murdered his family so brutally. But this was clearly the act of someone who was truly evil. Understand, Ronald may have been 23, but his siblings, the oldest was a preteen, 12 years old. He murdered all of his younger siblings. Now, you might understand someone snapping because their parents were abusive and killing their parents, but the children? No, that was evil. Ronald's actions were evil. And it placed an evil there. We all know it. Places kind of absorb it, the feeling, the mojo, just hearing about it. But that was just the first part of the story. The murders were the start. Because a year later, another family moved into the house on Amityville. It was the winter of 1975 when George and Kathy Lutz bought the house on Amityville and decided to move in with Kathy's 3 young children. They were newly married, and they got the house for a steal for some reason. Now, back then, real estate agents didn't have to tell you there was a brutal murder in the house just a year before, but I'm pretty sure it was in all the papers. But George and Kathy weren't from the area. They had just moved to Staten Island and just moved to the community of Amityville. But being Catholic, they did have the house blessed. And this is where the first instance of the haunting began. The priest who was blessing the house claimed that he heard a deep voice ordering him to get out and leave, and was later slapped in the face. He felt forced to leave and left the house before he completed the blessing, saying he would return, but did not. When he had gotten home, blisters had formed on his hands as if he had been burned by something, and he never returned to the Lutz's home. The first night they stayed in the home, George was mysteriously woken up at 3:15 in the morning. This is a special time because, based on the autopsy reports, 3:15 was when the Defoe family was murdered. George supposedly had no clue about the murders and was completely unaware they had occurred. So, why did he wake up at that particular time? We'll get back to the story in just a second, but I just want to take a minute out to give a shout out to Retro Rev Arcade, located at 484 North Highway 52 in Monk's Corner, Suite 111. This is going to be over by where Anytime Fitness used to be, in the shopping center located just behind Arby's. Retro Rev Arcade is a great place to take your kids and have all kinds of video games to play. They've got the old Street Fighter, the old Darkstalkers. They've got Marvel vs. Capcom. They've got House of the Dead. They've got Dance Dance Revolution. It is $15, and you play all you want for as long as you want. Open evenings, Monday through Saturday. Check it out. Retro Rev Arcade in Monk's Corner. Tell them Phoenix sent you. Now let's get back to the story. If George waking up at 3:15 in the morning was unusual, it was the fact that from day one, strange things started happening. Creaking on the stairs, doors slamming. It escalated day by day. At one point, one of the children was mysteriously locked in a closet. Having gone in to get something, the door closed on them and they were not able to get out. It was only when George came with an axe to break down the door that the door suddenly opened. Every night, though, George would find himself woken at 3:15 to some strange sound. At one point, even the door to the house had been blown open. These mysterious happenings kept happening, kept escalating. Strange occurrences, seeing things in the house. For 28 days, the Lutz family claimed to have been in hell in that house, tortured by some unseen force that continually tried to drive them insane. Finally, less than a month after buying and moving into the home, George, in the middle of the night, made the decision to get his family out of that house as quickly as he could, to leave and to never look back. if the Defoe family murders made headlines in the New York area, what happened to the Lutzes spread nationwide. Everyone heard about the story eventually. A book was written. Paranormal enthusiasts and investigators from all over descended on Amityville and the house in question. Investigations were done almost constantly while they were trying to offload this house. Even Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famed ones from the Conjuring movies and Annabelle and multiple other hauntings that you've probably heard of, even they went into the house to investigate. But through all of that, the only thing that was found was a single picture, very grainy, supposedly of the ghost of one of the Defoe children. And shortly before her death, Lorraine Warren claimed that while she was there, she could not identify what she felt, but she felt the presence of pure evil residing in that house. Now, perhaps what she felt was Ronald Defoe Jr. After all, he did kill his parents and his 4 siblings in that house only a few years before. But we'll never know. We'll never know. Now, as I said, I was going to give you the true story of Amityville. And the most important factor of the true story is not what the Lutz said, but what everybody else said about the Lutzes afterwards. First, the lawyer for Ronald Defoe Jr., who came out not long after the book and movie came out, claiming that George Lutz made the whole thing up, stating that he had spoken with Ronald at a certain point before telling his story, and that Ronald had mentioned the voices, and George just got drunk and came up with the idea and spread the story around because they didn't want to stay in the murder house. But the thing is that George did talk to Ronald, but it was only after he'd moved into the house and things started being weird. And supposedly at this time, Ronald was denying that anything was wrong with the house. So why would George be making it up off of what Ronald told him if Ronald was telling him the house was fine? It's an interesting thing to think about. The other thing is the people of Amityville. Now, of course, if you were to ask most of them today, they won't talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. It's kind of put a black mark on their community. I mean, the house that was used in the movie wasn't even the actual house. And so the people that live there are constantly being hounded. When it's not their house it's haunted, it's actually the one across the street. And the reason I know this is because I had a foster uncle who actually lived in Amityville at the time of the Defoe murders. And he actually told me that that house had a very disturbing feel to it after the murders happened. Just going past it, walking in the area of the house, you wanted to cross the street, you wanted to get away from it. He had no doubt that George Lutz was telling the truth. He completely believed their story and completely agreed with them, and so did plenty of other people who were there. Believed that there was something evil in that house. And perhaps the only evil thing to ever visit the house in Amityville was Ronald Defoe Jr. But maybe that was enough to leave a mark on the house, one that would have disturbed the next family and maybe the family after that, though no report was ever as outlandish as the report of the Lutzes. And that's the story, folks. I want to thank you guys for listening. I do want to add one little caveat. To about time, the Lutz family only made about $300,000 in total off of the movie and book that Hollywood used to sensationalize their story. And if you think about it, that's really not a whole lot of money given how much time it's been since then. I mean, I remember seeing the Amityville Horror when I was very little. It came out in the 70s. And, you know, you would think they would have made a little bit more off of something that was such a big staple in the horror genre, let alone in film in general. Anyway, that's this week's story. I hope that you enjoyed it. I thank you for being here with me. As always, go to thecarolinastoryteller.com to check out all the other episodes, the blog, check out all of our products. We have merch now. You can go to patreon.com/Carolina Storyteller to support the podcast. You know, help out a little bit, help me build it up better, help me make sure I don't make stutters like the podcast next time. And we'll see you next week.